All right, he is with ESPN. You read him there at ESPN.com. See him on ESPN. Hear him with our boy Marty on Marty and McGee every Saturday as well. He is Ryan McGee of ESPN on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline. What's up, McGee? How are you?
After that read, I want some of that Champy's chicken. Yes. I never had any of that. It's lunchtime. I'm like, well, I'm too far away. I'm in North Carolina. I'm too far away to get over there. But when I'm back inevitably 9 times this fall, y'all have to take me down there.
We will. You know what's crazy is their chicken is incredible. The best thing on their menu are the tamales.
Yeah, tamales.
You just said that. Yeah.
Oh,
okay.
So
well,
good.
I'm not prejudiced against any particular food. I'll eat it all. So we'll go.
So you guys, I don't know if you do this on a Zoom call. How you guys get together from all over the country in your roundtable discussion, but you and Rittenberg and our buddy Chris Lowe and David Hell and Schleybaugh and Heather Dinich get together and you ask some questions and you come with some answers. At first, I'd love to know how you guys do that. Or do you get together and have a cocktail, or do you do it over Zoom? How do you guys get together and have this discussion?
I wish. Now, I'll say this. We don't get together and have a cocktail, but I have a cocktail while I'm doing it. I always say my co-author on the bottom 10 is Captain Morgan every Sunday night, and that's the case. But no, we every week, a little inside baseball, every week, every Thursday, we do a big department Zoom call, and everybody you just listed, including all our writers and editors are all on this call, and we always have this plan, and we're going to talk about this and what's coming up or whatever. And we always get derailed because we always end up talking about whatever, the big hot topic in college football is. And then that kind of leads to these discussions. And eventually we're like, we should be like transcribing these things. And so that's what we do. And so it's this discussion. Sometimes it's all in a Google Doc and we're typing, and sometimes it's all of us talking, on a Zoom. But regardless, it's just an excuse to get together with, I'm very fortunate. I like all my coworkers, and so this is a good excuse for all of us to get on the phone together.
Yeah, and that's a good thing, to like what you do for a living and like your coworkers. And you really piqued the interest of a lot of fans here locally who are UAB fans, because UAB's last football game was a big win over BYU. In a bowl game. And that's one team you expect, BYU, to have a special year coming up. Talk more about that. What do you see in Kalani Sitake's team out there in Provo?
Well, first of all, really the main thing is the schedule. I give BYU credit because, and I've always, I think about when I was a student at Tennessee, and we would, we watch all the noon, 3:30 games or whatever, and we would rush back to our dorm and order a pizza and watch what I call mountain football. It'd be BYU and Utah and Hawaii and San Diego State, and all the SEC games we'd watch during the day were 12-9, and then that night it'd be 45-42. And so I've always been fascinated by mountain football. But to me, the question was, is there a group of 5 team that could crash or I was calling the Gang of 5 team that could crash the college football playoff, like Cincinnati did a year ago. To me, the only candidate's BYU, and it's just because of the schedule that they play. The reason Cincinnati was able to crash the playoff last year, beat Notre Dame, and they scheduled aggressively. And so to me, BYU has always scheduled aggressively. That year, you guys know, I the best game of the COVID year football game to me was the BYU Coastal Carolina game, and I was on the sideline for that game. And BYU that year, they had a schedule that was built, and also, oh, by the way, a first-round draft pick, a quarterback. They were built to crash the playoff, and their schedule fell apart because of COVID. And so I've always given them credit for scheduling aggressively. But you look at their schedule, and they're playing against the Big 12, and they're playing against the Pac-12, and they're playing against the SEC. They're playing an aggressive schedule, and to me, that's the only way you can do it. Now, I'm not saying they can. I'm not saying they will, but I'm saying they have the possibility to do it. Just because of the schedule that they have. Because everyone else, I love Coastal Carolina. You guys know that if you watch Marty McGee. I love App State. I love UAB. I love what all these programs have done. But the reality is their schedules don't allow them to put the kind of resume in front of the committee that you have to, and BYU's does.
Ryan McGee is with us on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline. You can read this roundtable at ESPN.com. And I hate to ask you about someone else's work, but right before your answer, Schleybaugh goes, with Nebraska there. And it's just like, look, everybody, I think a lot of people think Scott Frost is a really good coach, Ryan, and you just assume at some point he's going to break through at Nebraska. I mean, it may have to be this year for him. I mean, he had to take a pay cut, change coordinators. So it might have to be this year for him to keep that job. If he never breaks through at Nebraska, that will end up being one of the biggest disappointments in college football. I think a lot of people thought his ability to coach paired with his alma mater, he would at least challenge for maybe that division at one point.
Yeah, and has not even come close.
Not close.
Not even in the conversation. And it's, I've always joked, talking about the bottom 10. A couple of years ago, I joked, I think like the coveted fifth spot I wrote in was like 1999. And what I said that Nebraska, Tennessee, Florida State, Michigan, I said they were all seen in California trying to steal Doc Brown's DeLorean to go back to 1999 because they're all in that boat together, right? But the difference is, and listen, we were having the same conversation about Harbaugh a year ago, and then he had one of the greatest years, certainly one of the best years they've had in the last 20 years. And his look at the NFL notwithstanding, he's kind of got it turned around now. It only takes a year. It only takes one season. And so you're right. I mean, and this is it, because you guys know the deal. Once you start bailing the boat and you start throwing your assistants out, once you start, making scapegoats out of the guys who are on your staff, and you're the last guy left.
Yeah.
You got. I think about Dabo Swinney. When they had that incredibly embarrassing loss to West Virginia in the Orange Bowl, Dabo's going to be done. It's over. They can't get out of their own way. This was the year they finally were supposed to have broken through, and now they got embarrassed on national television. And then what did he do? I mean, after a year where he went to the Orange Bowl, played on New Year's, he fired all of his assistants, and he brought in Brent Venables, and he brought in these guys. And lo and behold, they turned into a pretty solid decade dynasty. So, it can turn around quickly. But if I'm being honest, and I literally just booked my travel for the College World Series for June like an hour ago. So I'm already thinking about Nebraska. And when I go up there this summer, they're all going to ask about it. And I'll tell them the same thing I'm telling you, which is it is literally now or never. And it's devastating to me that it doesn't work because I love Scott Frost. But to watch him turn into this really miserable, surly guy at press conferences, and every time he sees a reporter coming, that's sad to me because that's not who that guy is, but that's what that job has turned him into.
Ryan McGee is with us on the JohnsonRVCenter.com hotline. Obviously, we've been blessed to have the opportunity to see the season after a championship a lot around here. 09, 11, 12, 15, 17, 20, and 2010 with Auburn. So we know what Kirby Smart and Georgia is facing this year. What do you think his biggest challenge is, Ryan, when you're getting ready to not defend a national championship, but play a college football season after you won a national championship?
Well, I think it is. It's part of the genius of Nick Saban, and you guys know this, which is handling the egos, which is handling the expectations and handling being told, all winter long, this is the greatest year of my life. All these fans stopping these kids in the shopping mall. This is the greatest year of my life, greatest fall of my life, and crying. And so to me, that's what it is. I go back to, I remember when I grew up in Raleigh and I was a big NC State guy. And I always remember what Jim Valvano said about after the great cardiac pack championship run of 1983. And he said, everybody on that 83 roster, guys that were great and guys who weren't so great, all had the same goal. In 1984, they didn't even make the NCAA tournament. And in fact, they got bounced out of the NIT, I think, by like Murray State. And when he was always asked about that, he said he would look down the bench, and he had either half the bench were guys with national championship rings that had been told you're the greatest story of all time, and then the other half of the bench were McDonald's All-Americans that were freshmen that NC State had never had before, and they didn't understand why they weren't playing. And so that's the difficulty of it, is managing, now you're the national champions, now you've been in the mountaintop, can you stay there? And history tells us that, unless you're Alabama, staying there is very, very, very difficult. And so, yeah, that's the part of it that's going to be. And plus, they lost a lot of dudes. I don't care how deep you are. When you lose Jordan Davis and, oh, by the way, another half a dozen potential first-rounders, filling those roster spots, no matter how great you recruited over the last 10 years, is just hard.
Yeah, and Nick's only gone back-to-back one time himself, so it's not easy to do. But Southern culture so well. What do you think that finally meant for the Georgia fans who had wallered in the mud all these years since 1980 in Vince
Wallered.
Dooley?
That's a good Southern word.
Yeah, that was really good.
Ryan understood it.
I know.
I didn't understand, but I go back to Clemson. I've graduated high school in Greenville, South Carolina, and this is in the late '80s, early '90s, and everybody's driving around with their trucks that had their 1981 national championship stickers, and those stickers had all faded. Right? They weren't orange anymore. They're almost pink, almost yellow. They'd faded so much, and to be able to finally scrape those bumper stickers off those trucks and put a new one on there. I've never seen a bunch of people more proud. And I was down in Athens. My daughter's visiting colleges now. I was down in Athens a few weeks ago. And if I'm being 100% honest, it's a little insufferable. Like it's hard to say. but the pride is unbelievable. And they've earned it. They've earned it. The heartbreak that they've suffered over and over and over and over again. And you begin to think it's never going to happen. We're never going to get over the hump. And so to finally do it is great. And then, you mentioned Schlebaugh. I've talked to him about this forever. He lives in Athens. He's never apologized for the fact that he's a proud Georgia graduate. Talks about him all the time, and it's just a return of pride. Pride wasn't the problem. It's just a return of having that pride reinforced. And so yeah, it's just fun to see. I joke about him being hard to take, but it is fun to see. And it'll be interesting to see how that team and how that fan base reacts to it, because the expectation level is so high now. The turn on Stetson Bennett about 4 days after he won the night. He was a folk hero for about 48 hours. And then it was like, why are you staying? So suddenly they turned back into SEC fans very quickly.
Yeah, and Kirby Smart knows this better than anybody. He's better equipped to deal with this than anybody because he saw it himself in Tuscaloosa that Nick Saban and Dabo Swinney and Urban Meyer and people like that have geared fan bases now to think it doesn't have to be just one. Like, why can't we be the team that's now winning it every other year or back-to-back? And that's what he's got to deal with next.
Yeah, and the best part of it for me, honestly, has been him. Because, that's a kid who grew up sitting in the stands at Sanford Stadium. And we all know played there. And his dream was to win a national championship at Georgia, and he's done it now. But we all also know him well enough to know, I joke about 48 hours, but I think the parade was like 6 days later. He probably gave himself to the end of that parade to enjoy it. And then he immediately went back into work mode. And so to me, the best part has been watching him because very rarely does someone's ultimate dream get to come true. And the reality is that Kirby Smart's did. And now, you get a little taste of it, man. I talk to race car drivers about this all the time. Like IndyCar guys will tell you, winning the Indy 500 is the greatest thing in the world, but it's also the worst because now all you do the rest of your life is try to figure out how to get back to victory lane. Once you've won it once, it's not enough. And so the trick is making sure your locker room full of kids understands that one ring is not enough. And it's going to be a very interesting psychology/sociology experiment at Athens this fall.
I'll be honest. I went to my first Eric Church concert Friday night. I know Marty was there.
Yeah. Did you see? I don't know if y'all saw him. He made the mistake of FaceTiming in to Marty McGee from the Atlanta airport the next morning.
That was rough.
Roman Harper was sitting in with me on the show, and Marty FaceTimed in, like literally leaning against the wall, like Kid Shalane, had the big holes, big bags under his eyes. And we go to the commercial break, and Roman goes, he might not be happy that he decided to do that.
Yeah.
Because y'all know Marty always looks really put together, and he did not. So my point, I say all that to say this: that must have been a damn pretty good concert on Friday.
It was. That's what I was going to tell you. I'm a habitual watcher of Marty McGee, and if I happen to be out and about, I'm listening. And I missed it the next day because, truthfully, I was overserved. Because Eric started at 8:59 p.m. Central Time, and he ended at midnight on the nose, and nonstop, and it was fantastic. And I know Marty was there at the same concert, and I was just wondering if he made it in for the show or did a hit. So now I know he looked rough doing it.
Yeah, he knew that was coming. I give him credit because he and I both will do we will go above and beyond just to make it to air on Sunday morning. As you know, partly cloud, that's our thing. Just the weekend before, I drove through the night. I got done with Sports Center at 2 o'clock in the morning in Greenville, South Carolina, and drove through the night like an idiot and got back to Charlotte in time to do Marty McGee the next morning, because I was there to cover Duke and Michigan State and all that. And so we'll go above and beyond to try to make the show. But even Marty understood. Like, it was like Wednesday that week, we got a text. I won't be doing the show Saturday. I already called Roman Harper. He's in. And I was like, oh, man, he's got something planned. And then when I looked at that, I realized, I said, where are you going to be? He said, Birmingham and then Austin. So he had to go to Austin for some Pit Boss Grill thing at the NASCAR event. And I don't know how much, he doesn't do chemicals, but I'm willing to bet they probably pumped some Red Bull into him just to get him through that thing.
Go follow Ryan on Twitter at ESPN McGee. Read this college football roundtable with all the ESPN reporters there at ESPN.com. Ryan, part of that. Ryan, we greatly appreciate the time. Always fun talking with you.
Anytime, boys. Appreciate it.
Hi, buddy. See you. Ryan McGee with us on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline.